All right, what's going on, everyone? So we are back with Growth Follows Change. This is going to be episode 2 of this new series where I'm just going to be interviewing and kind of just like talking to people in the fitness realm or just in any kind of realm, but like changing themselves, they're growing, they're learning new things, whether that be from their self or other people and whatever. So today I have Dylan, who I will just let him introduce himself and then we'll just jump straight into it.
Yeah, Therese, thanks for having me. So, my name is Dylan Hummel. I am 23 years old. I'm from New York, and I am an online fitness coach. I actually have the pleasure of working with Therese. And I've been doing this now for about 4 years. That's pretty much a little bit about me.
All right. And so I don't even know this. How exactly did your journey or like did it start? What happened or what made you want to get into all of this?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always on the heavier side, but I did play a lot of sports growing up, so I was never really like I was heavy, but I didn't really look as heavy as I actually was. I want to say at my heaviest, I was probably pushing 300 pounds, but the highest weight I have on record though is like 270 something because I kind of got to the point where I was just afraid to step on the scales.
Yeah, no, I
So
get that one.
so we put that thing away for a little bit. But if I had to guess, it was probably around 300. I actually don't even have any photos of me at my heaviest, which I wish I did looking back on it, just because I didn't feel comfortable taking pictures of myself until, I lost a couple pounds. The highest weight I probably have photos of myself as is probably like 260, 270. But what really got me into this, like I said, I kind of grew up a little bit on the heavier side. A lot of that attributed to my poor eating habits coming home from school, crushing salami and cheese sandwiches, freezer
Wait, you
burritos,
don't like
dude.
spam? You don't eat
Yeah.
salami, but you won't eat spam? What?
All right, that's fair. I feel like those meats are in the similar realm. But, yeah, pretty much just crushing anything I can get my hands on. Running to the snack cabinet, crushing Little Debbie's, like you name it, I was eating it. But when I was 17, I went to the doctor, and he told me that I had the blood pressure of an 80-year-old man, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. And at that point, I was like, all right, I have to do something about this. So, obviously, not really knowing what I was doing, I just kind of was trying everything. I completely cut salt out of my diet, thinking that was help. I spun my wheels for a little bit, but somehow, some way, I was able to actually lose all the weight on my own. Like, I think on my own, I ended up losing about 80 pounds, and I actually hit the
Oh
100-pound
shit.
mark throughout my contest prep. Obviously, in a contest prep, you're getting a little bit leaner than
Yeah.
your typical, just getting abs for the summer body, whatever. But that was kind of my big turning point. And that was when I was like, all right, my health is a concern. I'm only 17 years old. Like I'm taking years off my life being at this body weight. So that was kind of my big turning point. And I feel like everybody has that. There's always just something that happens where you sort of just you flip a switch and you're like, all right, I have to start doing something about this. So that's really what that was for me.
So I want to go to you said that you played a lot of sports and your heaviest was that you on record was 270. What, you don't mind, like what kind of was that like? Like, were you okay being at that or were you like fine because you were playing sports? Because I feel like there are so many people out there that getting to get more comfortable and like pushing the limits of like how heavy you should be based on your health, right? I guess.
Yeah,
Like,
so
how was that?
it sucked, man. I was fortunate in the sense that I had good friends growing up, so I was never bullied for being
Mm,
overweight. The occasional comments here and there, but it's just kind of how my friends and I are. We just kind of poke fun at each other, but nothing really hurtful to me. So I never really had any issues with bullying or anything like that. But it definitely made sports really tough. I actually, I played just high school sports growing up, and then I really got into playing hockey. And surprisingly enough, for being as heavy as I was, like I was able to move pretty well, which is kind of
hey,
a shock to me. Yeah,
skating is fun. And some
yeah,
big
dude,
boys can move on ice.
dude, and that was me. I'm a big boy that was able to move. Like I felt like I was pretty agile, so I felt like I was able to perform okay. I did very well. I ended up playing hockey all throughout college, so there was never really anything extreme in terms of like how I felt self image wise. But like I had mentioned, that blood pressure thing and just health wise, that is sort of like what really, really scared me. And I also, I hated how I looked. I'm going to say a couple things, which I'm sure you've probably relate to because I know that you kind of have a history of being overweight as well. But I was tired of going to pool parties and wearing a shirt in the pool or not swimming at all and making up some excuse as to why I couldn't take my shirt off and go in the pool.
Yeah,
I was
man.
tired. I
Oh
was tired
man.
of wearing, I was tired of wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt throughout the summer to hide my body. I was tired of sitting on the couch and putting a pillow over my stomach to hide my stomach. There was just so many little things that just kind of at some point I
Those
was
are
just
some big
like,
boy secrets right there that they don't even know
yeah,
about.
yeah. Sorry to all the big boys out there. I'm kind of unloading our
So
secrets here, but
you
go ahead.
said that your blood pressure was 80, and that's kind of what like kicked you into like, hey, I need to change, right? And for me, it was tearing my ACL. Doctor
Hmm.
said I would never be normal again. I was like, okay.
Hmm.
So what would you give to people that are in that similar situation? Like obviously I know that at the end of the day it comes down to them doing it, but like what would you say to those people?
To the people who are struggling to sort of like
Yeah,
make
they're
that
on the
change.
verge. They're like, I believe people got to hit rock bottom,
Hmm.
but some people don't know if they're there yet. So how do you necessarily like tell them or talk to them and help them get to something needs to change?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing there is really just getting yourself started. Even if you feel like you are trending towards that rock bottom and like something's not right, you're not feeling well, you're not able to do things at the way you should be able to do things, like it's unfortunate and kind of like you said, like most people tend to have to hit rock bottom to recognize like, all right, this is the kind of time for me to make a change. But if you don't have to let it get to that point, don't let it get to that point. That is an awful feeling that I don't think anybody should or have to or want to go through something like that because it is not a good feeling for anybody. So if you notice yourself kind of heading down that path of, um, literally taking years off your life, that enough should be like, all right, let me stop here and start making, small changes. That way, kind of get myself back on track here. Give yourself a long, healthy life to live.
If you could tell people to do one thing right now, whether it's
Hmm.
whatever it may be, they just want to they want to start, get their feet wet. What would they do? What would you tell them to do?
Move your damn body. So many people are, they don't move. I do a lot of consult calls, and one of the questions I ask people is like, do you have an idea of how many steps you take a day? And for most people, it's like between like 2 and 3,000, which is like barely any movement whatsoever. So that's a big one. But another big one is just cleaning up what you are putting in your body. A lot of people keep a lot of unhealthy foods in the house. They're cheap, so they buy bags of chips, they buy a little Debbie snack case, they buy soda, they buy juice, all of this BS, man. So just cleaning up what is actually in your household. And like for me growing up, when I had dealt with any sort of stress, kind of food was sort of my way of coping. I would just run to the snack cabin. That's sort of what would give me that dopamine hit. It would make me feel a little bit better. So a big thing as well is just cleaning up what you actually have in your household, because if you don't have immediate access to it, you're going to be much less likely to reach for it, right? And
Oh
what are the
yeah.
chances, if you're stressed out and you're in your house and you don't have these things accessible to you, like what are the odds that you're going to drive to the nearest gas station to go get something, right? If you actually need to do that, there's a chance that you probably really needed it. But if you don't have things in your household, you're going to be like, all right, maybe I don't actually need that. So just cleaning up what is in your household is a big first step that I think a lot of people could take that will immediately produce some pretty quick results. So just cleaning up what you have in the house and replacing that with better whole foods, because to be honest with you, even if you are somebody who struggles with overeating, you're going to be much less likely to overeat healthy foods than you are, a bunch of BS that is only going to make you keep
Yeah,
wanting
dude.
to keep going back for more and more.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I'll say that. My weakness is peanut M&Ms, and M's, and I will tell you for sure if
Oh,
I have peanut M&Ms or a bag of carrots or like fruit, I will eat fruit, but I'll just get full more fast, and I'm like, okay, I'm good. But M&Ms,
yeah.
I could just fuck up an entire little cart gallon, whatever they are, the pound things that you can get from Sam's Club. I'll fuck up that whole thing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm trying to think what my big thing. I was like a garbage disposal dude. I would literally eat anything and everything. There was never like one thing where I was like, that was just kind of my thing. Maybe like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or something like that.
What? I
Dude,
Cheeto
best.
puffs, bro. Oh, the Cheeto balls, that Cheeto ball container right there.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Chips were my enemy. Chips were
Chips,
my
yeah.
enemy right there. That's a lot of people's enemy because people like it's so much. It's just so much of nothing.
It really is. And they're so easy to just, it's so easy to just sit there and just put down a bag mindlessly.
Yeah, I could still put down a bag and like I don't even
Oh,
eat like
yeah.
that anymore. And it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
so okay. So for people that are like starting, they're moving more, they're getting into this, and you mentioned that you are an online coach, right? So where do you think that people can go from doing it on their own versus having a coach? Like what really separates that difference? What really separates from me being a new person in this world coming to you as a client versus me figuring out on my own?
Yeah, I always, to be honest with you, obviously we are in the coaching business, so it's our job to coach people. But I think everybody would benefit from first trying stuff on their own. I think that there's a lot of merit to learning the wrong things first before coming to a coach. That way, you've been able to exhaust some things, maybe even make a little bit of progress on your own. But through that sort of experimentation, you sort of find what doesn't work. And there's a lot of good behind that because you know what works for you, or you'll find out what works for you and what
Hmm.
doesn't work for you. So I always think it's good to try a little bit of something on your own first and just see what changes, if any, you're able to make on your own. But, on the flip side, there could be an argument that, you know, we could just learn how to do things the right way the first time and, kind of go in with a coach, which is obviously what we do. So I do think that, I always encourage people to try, especially for like lifestyle people who are extremely overweight. I always think that there's a lot of importance just trying, experimenting a little bit on your own
There's
first.
a lot of self-gratitude in losing the first few pounds by yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think after trying on your own for a little bit first, and then even if you are making good progress, sort of linking up with a coach at that point to just sort of take over and perhaps optimize some of the things that you are doing within what you're already doing. Perhaps change some things that way you can further make better progress. There's a lot of importance behind that, and I want to bring up something that I think is the biggest issue for, I'm going to go ahead and say 100% of people who try to lose body fat on their own is being able to keep it off long term. And that is really one of the big importances of having a coach, is because they're not going to, well, a good coach is going to show you not only how to properly lose the weight, but how to lose that weight in a way where you are able to keep it off after losing the weight. Everybody,
Yeah.
I tell this to everybody. Everybody knows a person who has lost a shit ton of weight and ended up gaining it all back and then some. And the reason for that was because how they actually went about losing the weight. And then they just kind of get stuck in the cycle of losing weight every single year, then gaining all that weight back. And it's just this endless cycle. And it's frustrating. That sucks. Nobody likes going through that. So I think at some point, even if you are just trying to lose a couple pounds, I think a coach can be really beneficial so that you can understand how to lose that weight and end up keeping it off to make it sustainable for you long term. So, I think it's always a good thing to experiment a little bit on your own, but also you don't want to end up in that vicious cycle like I had talked about. So at
Hmm.
some point, making sure that you kind of get into contact with somebody who knows what they're doing and is able to help you get the rest of that weight off, but keep it off for good.
So, okay, I guess if this is my question,
Hmm.
I have to say I've lost weight. Like I went through the first process of losing a little bit of weight and then putting weight back on, losing a little bit of weight and then putting weight back on. And then I finally got into powerlifting, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I didn't lose weight, I just got extremely strong. But I found out that like firsthand, if you don't clean your diet up, there's nothing that's gonna fix that. Like you can't outwork eating
Right.
bad. And I didn't also realize the importance of tracking my food. I had no idea how much I was under eating. And people don't actually realize that. So how do you go about telling people like, no, I'm telling you, you're gonna eat more. It's fine. Because so many people get afraid of if I'm eating so much more food, I'm just gonna keep putting on weight. And I believe that that's one of the vicious cycles, right? They lose all the weight because they cut all of their calories so quickly. And then it's like, okay, now I can be a normal person again, but I'm going back to being who I used to be.
Right. And yeah, kind of going back to one of your questions earlier, another good thing that somebody could do if they're like just starting out is just track your food. Like understand, just take a typical day of because everybody has like a typical day of eating that they follow.
Hmm.
Just throw what you're eating into a macro calculator and just get an idea of how much you're actually putting in your body. And for a lot of people, that will be a really big eye opener. So a lot of people, everybody says like, I'm not really eating that much. I'm not losing weight. Then you plug in to some sort of calculator what you're actually eating, and they're like, whoa, I'm eating a lot more than I think I did, just because the things that you are eating are probably very fat dense. So although
Hmm.
the quantity is not huge, the caloric density of it is. So just throwing what you're actually eating on a daily basis into some sort of calculator to figure out like how much you're actually eating will be a big eye opener for a lot of people. So I kind of missed your question there. What was that one?
No, no, no. So I want to ask this question. As a coach, how are you? You obviously coach a lot of lifestyle clients, right?
Mhm.
What's one of your, well, I guess, do you actually coach a lot of lifestyle or prep clients?
Majority of my roster right now is prep clients, but I do coach lifestyle people.
So do you
How I
prefer a
started.
lifestyle or a prep coach? Or which side do you like a lot more, if you like one side or not?
So I don't want to say that I would like one side more than the other just because they have their differences. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to be a lifestyle coach just because those type of people, that's how I got started. I didn't start out being a bodybuilder. I started out as lifestyle, just wanting to lose weight. So those people, I really understand the shoes that they're in. I understand how they feel, particularly the overweight crowd. So at the end of the day, helping those people, it's awesome putting clients on stage. There's no better feeling in the world aside from helping somebody lose weight and
Yeah,
ultimately
man.
change how they think, how they feel. To me, there's nothing more rewarding in that because that's what happened to me. Losing weight quite literally changed my life. So being able to help other people do that same thing, there's nothing more rewarding to me than that. So they both have their differences. I like them both. However, I don't think I can pick one or, well, actually, I could pick one or the other. It'd definitely be lifestyle people, but they both have their differences, and I enjoy both, and they both get the same level of attention. So, yeah,
I completely relate to the fact of changing the way somebody feels about themselves. I like seeing that firsthand is honestly kind of crazy because I did that. Like I was the
yeah,
person, like I was once losing all the weight and I know how that made me feel. I was like, holy shit, this is cool. Like, wow, this
yeah,
is this is actually kind of cool. This is nice. And I try to push people so much to just like on the other side of hatred and being uncomfortable and being disappointed, there is such a bright side. It's such a just like a yeah, like I feel good. I feel better. And not even in a narcissistic way, just in a my body feels so much better.
yeah. And when you lose that first initial pound of like 15 pounds, like helping somebody lose that initial 15 pounds, like that is like the best feeling just because, they're starting to feel better. And, when especially if you're working with somebody who's like pretty overweight, you're not going to see a ton of visual changes when they lose, 15, 20, sometimes even up to 50 pounds. Like there's not a whole lot of visual changes right out of the gate. So that's sort of one of the things that I tell a lot of my guys is just how do you feel? Focus on that aspect because ultimately how you feel is going to be much more important than how you look. Obviously, we are chasing a visual goal, but when you are just starting out and we're not seeing a ton of those visual changes, just focusing on how you feel. How is your sleep? How is your mood? How is your energy? Are you able to do tasks in your life easier than you were prior? Still having a ton of brain fog, or is your productivity at work better? All of those things are really important to focus on when you are first starting out with weight loss, just because those are things that you're going to see pretty much immediately when you start cleaning up your diet, when you start moving your body a little bit more. Those are things that are going to give you pretty immediate returns. So I think it's really important to focus on those things. And when you do, that's sort of going to kind of give you that little bit of boost. It's going to give you that little bit of motivation. It's like, all right, I'm feeling good. I want to keep feeling like this. So that's sort of that motivation to continue losing the body fat, which ultimately is going to lead to that end visual result that ultimately you're looking for. So it feels really good, helping people lose body fat. There's nothing better.
So you said motivation. How would you give people that motivation isn't necessarily going to always be like when especially if you're somebody, I'll say this, that's very overweight, like I once was.
Mhm.
after a certain while, it gets, I won't say boring, but it does get hard, so to speak, because you're in it for so long. Like, if you have to lose 100 pounds, you're going to be doing it for a while.
Yeah.
If you want to do it healthy and you want it to actually come off. Like, how would you help those people? Like, hey, I just don't have the motivation to do this, but like, I know I need to continue to put my health first because
Right.
discipline, motivation versus discipline. What's your thought process or opinion on that?
Yeah. So obviously, people know that motivation is sort of this fleeting concept. Everybody knows that. If you can ask anybody, are you motivated to do stuff all the time? Like, no, nobody feels like that. There's not a single person in the world that does. So especially when you're talking about somebody who has quite a long time frame to get to where they ultimately want to end up being, what I have found works the best is just splitting that up. If you tell somebody it's like, all right, you want to lose 100 pounds and that is the only goal that you have set, like that is going to take, that could take years to lose that 100 pounds and do it the right way, right? And I'm going to be honest, like that is a long time to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. And a lot of people have a hard time doing monotonous things, doing the same thing over and over and over again. So something that I found is breaking that up and just setting mini goals in place, just setting like little milestones for them to sort of achieve on the way. Just because, if I tell you like, all right, our initial goal is to lose 15 pounds, they're like, all right, I can probably do that in 2 months. Losing 15 pounds in 2 months, it sounds a lot better than, all right, we're going to lose 100 pounds in 4 years. Like, that
Yeah.
it's just, it's that thought is so daunting. So there's definitely a psychological aspect to it there. So really just breaking it up and not just like weight loss goals, but just having other goals set as well. Certain performance markers, and perhaps even things that aren't even fitness or gym related, hitting certain work markers, just doing things to sort of break up that long period of time into smaller chunks, smaller goals that they can hit to just sort of give them that boost to keep on going. So that is really the biggest thing that I find works the best for people, is just breaking up that long ass fat loss phase into just sort of mini phases where we're trying to focus on certain aspects of things that are ultimately going to lead to that end result, because that's really what it is, right? If you just focus on your habits and the things that you are doing on a daily basis, aside from, obviously it's important to have a big goal in the back of your mind that you want to achieve, but
Yeah.
just focusing on the things that you are doing in your day-to-day life is what's going to make that end result so much better, and so much easier too, because if you just focus on the things that you're doing day in and day out, at the end of the day, all of those things that you are doing, all of those habits you're building, that is what is going to produce that end result. So kind of going back a little bit here, but habits, having replacing old habits with good ones. And when things become habit, you really don't think about it as much. So, if your end goal is to lose 100 pounds and right now you have really poor habits, but if you're able to replace those poor habits with good habits that are going to be conducive to that end result, you really don't end up thinking about it anymore. That just becomes your day to day. And if you're just going throughout your day to day with improved habits, that is going to lead to that end result, you're not going to be thinking about it as much because that's just your new normal. You think about it, Therese, when you were losing body fat, right? What changed? Like, what are you doing now that is different from when you were living that overweight life, right? Your habits are better now. Do you think about all the stuff that you're like, obviously you think about it to some extent, but your lifestyle is different. So,
Yeah.
if you had to lose body fat now, it's kind of like no brainer to you because now you have those habits that are already in place. So it's much easier for you now than it was prior. So you don't really think about it as much. So habits are a super big thing. It's tough. It's hard to replace habits, especially when
You've been doing it for so long.
yeah, and I think a lot of people expect to replace poor habits with good ones overnight. But if you've been doing something for 10, 15, 20 years, you can't expect to 180 that and flip a switch overnight. That's what happens. People try that and that's why they get burnt out so quickly.
Yeah,
Slowly
everybody
replacing.
goes too fast, too quick.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants immediate gratification. You posted that the other day. I think it was one of them was perfectionism. Everybody wants to do everything so perfect. They just want to immediately switch. And
Yeah.
you can't, you have to realize that like it doesn't work like that. Like you can't just immediately change and expect the end result that you want already without putting in any kind of work.
Right.
That's my favorite quote of all time is that, but you've been eating bad, you've been doing all of this for so long. How do you expect that?
Right.
You kind of just have to look at it and just I very much agree with the fact of changing it into small goals. Hey, for 1 month, I'm gonna make sure I walk every day. Boom. Okay. I want to get to 10 pounds down or 5 pounds down this month. I feel like everybody expects those large drops. You got to realize, dude, weight loss is a very long process. Fat loss, I should
Yeah,
say. Fat loss is a very long process.
a lot longer than people think.
Yeah, I still have a bunch of fat I need to lose, but man, I don't want to do that. I'm enjoying this rest period. I know you talked about, for those of you who don't know, obviously Dylan lost a bunch of weight, but I want you to talk about this a little bit. You lost a bunch of weight and now you're you're very stressed out. Your body is literally stressed out. So
Yeah.
kind of go into that.
Yeah, so I compete back in 2023, the summer of 2023. And after that prep, actually, let me rewind a little bit. So, halfway through that prep, I ended up getting blood work done. That was the first time I've ever had blood work done. And that panel came back with not what I would have liked to see. I believe my testosterone was maybe like a 240, which for those of
Wow.
you who don't know, 22, 21-year-old male, typically you want to see that above a 600. So being at a 214, obviously that was of some concern. So at this point, I was 12 weeks out, and my coach and I at the time, we were like, all right, we have two decisions here. Either we pull you out of this contest prep, we get this take care of, get started on hormone replacement therapy, or we decide to just go for it. And at this
Hmm.
point, I'd already been on prep for 12 weeks. I was right at the halfway point, and I was like, I'm too deep into this to turn back. So I made the decision to finish out the contest prep. And when your testosterone is that low, and my thyroid was also a little bit on the low end, still within what's considered in range, but definitely on the low end. And we obviously had some big concerns about my ability to lose body fat. So we had to push my body extremely, extremely hard to get in shape for this show.
Wow.
And we ended up having a much better turnout than I had expected. I was able to somehow, by the grace of God, get in shape. But what that did to my body was pretty brutal. And still to this day, I've kind of turned into a little bit of a case study. So what is believed to have happened is what's called sex hormone induced adrenal failure. So, because of my low sex hormones, that kind of put me on top of the contest prep itself, that sort of put me in a state of adrenal failure. And adrenal issues, they are nasty. They are not fun to deal with whatsoever, especially when you are getting into like stage 2 and stage 3 adrenal failure. I honestly don't know what stage I actually ended up getting into, because at first, we weren't really quite sure what was going on with my body. So right after the contest prep, I got the hormone thing situated, but I still wasn't feeling good, which was really weird.
Hmm.
So at this point, like I said, I compete in the summer, so June, and it was around December, and I was still not feeling good, and I was having a ton of issues. Like my sleep was the biggest thing. I had the hardest time falling asleep. Like I would toss and turn all night, and I would finally get to sleep around like early morning, so like 5, 6 a.m., and then I would sleep through half the day because my body it was just so messed up. My sleep was awful, and obviously, when your sleep goes, everything else follows.
Hmm.
Your mental
Yeah.
clarity, how you feel throughout the day, your productivity, everything follows your sleep. So if you are not getting enough sleep, you need to. But for me, I physically was just unable to get that sleep. So I was quite literally going crazy. I was probably in the worst mental, physical state of my entire life. And after December, I started feeling a little bit better. And my coach and I ended up doing a consult call with Austin Stout, who, for those of you who don't know, he's probably one of the smartest guys in this industry. He's very, very good at what he does. And we ended up getting a Dutch test done, and my Dutch test came back also not good. So when my serum blood work showed that my cortisol in the morning was actually fine. And that's why you can't go based off of morning cortisol numbers. If you can go get your cortisol done in the
Mm.
morning, that's really just not a good metric to look at. It could be low, and it also could be high for several reasons. If you get cut off in the traffic on the way to getting your blood work done, that might show high cortisol in your blood work, which, a lot of people are going to freak out and be like, oh my God, my cortisol is a 20. But, at the end of the day, like, that's just sort of just a snapshot in time. So that number on serum blood work really isn't that accurate. It's better to do either a urine or saliva test if you're going to test cortisol, and that's what a Dutch test is. A Dutch test looks at urine samples throughout I think it's a 24-hour period. So that Dutch test showed that, like my blood work showed, my cortisol in the morning perfectly fine, but then throughout the day, my cortisol ended up like spiking. So I was having a bunch of issues. That's why I was having issues sleeping.
Mm.
So that sort of explained that. So, I started using a bunch of supplements to sort of help get that situated, or what I thought was getting me situated. I actually did start feeling a little bit better. And I think the issue that was made was I sort of jumped into things way too soon. So, I started hitting the gym really hard again. I started doing some other things that really weren't conducive to helping my adrenal issues. And that sort of dug me into a deeper hole than I was to start out with. So now, fast forward to June of this year, so a year later, still dealing with those issues, but now I'm taking a much slower approach with things. I've actually pulled back my training to around 2 to 4 RAR, so leaving a couple reps in the tank with every single exercise. And a lot of what my training is now is just what I can handle for that session. So, I'm pretty good at listening to my body. So if I'm, have a planned training session for the day, depending on how I feel for that day, will kind of sort of dictate the workload that I can do. If I'm feeling good, I'll let it rip. I'll still keep a couple reps in reserve, but I might throw in another exercise or two. But to be honest with
Okay.
you, I'm not doing more than like 12. I would say like 8 to 12 sets a session. So very, very low volume, leaving reps in the tank. That way, I can sort of let my body relax a little bit. And I'm only training around 3 to 4 days per week, again, sort of depending on how I'm actually feeling. But I actually started working with a new coach now. Still love my old coach. We stay in touch, but I started working with actually one of Austin Stout's coaches, Trey Bruffy, and he's been a big help for me. He sort of helped me find the importance of life outside of bodybuilding, which I've actually been able to use a lot with a lot of my athletes, just because especially young bodybuilders, they're all about the gym. That's
Yeah.
pretty much their entire life. And while that is great, and I do think that you have to have a level of obsession in this sport to really be great at it, you also have to have a life outside of that. So just having hobbies and sort of things that you can use to decompress outside of the gym. And to be honest with you, like, you're not going to be bodybuilding for the rest of your life. So it's important that you have something else to sort of fall back on as something
Oh yeah.
for enjoyment, right? And he's really helped me understand the importance behind that and just relaxing outside of the gym. I haven't done any cardio, and besides, I did start playing pickup hockey again, so that's been
Nice.
something that I look forward to. Only a couple times a month though, just because my body, it's not good for my body to be playing all the time, just because that is a very, very high stress sport, especially on the body.
Yeah.
So, but just having things outside that I really look forward to, and just having hobbies, spending more time with my girlfriend. Obviously I have a business that I run as well, so putting more time into that. But just doing things that I can look forward to outside of bodybuilding, and it sort of makes that process. Obviously, my training's boring. I'm going to be honest with you. Like some days, like I don't look forward to going to the gym just because of how boring it is. I don't like training with reps in reserve. It sucks, and I've been
Yeah.
doing it.
I don't understand how people do this. Like, if anybody doesn't know, I was very stressed. My body was very stressed out for just very similar to Dylan, how long I was losing weight. And I very much I flipped a switch. I literally one day went from just powerlifting, not eating, just normally just doing my normal to, all right, losing weight and just going hard. Boom, boom, boom. Body was stressed. And now, how can you train with reps? Like, I find training fun in the beginning. And then I'm just like, okay. Like, after I'm like, shit, no, I can't train to failure. I can't. I gotta stop.
Yeah, and you know what? Just to kind of like touch on that a little bit. At first, like, I really struggled with it. And I think like some days when I'm feeling good, like I did push it a little bit harder than I should have. But one of the things that has helped me with the whole reps and reserve thing, obviously it's a necessity for me. I have to do it for the betterment of just improving my health. And
Yes.
I'm in no rush to, obviously I miss bodybuilding. I want to get back to training hard. I want to get back to pushing things hard again. But for right now, I don't really have a timeline. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm getting some blood work done next week. This is going to be like the sixth panel I've gotten done this year. So pending how that looks, that will kind of give us a good idea of the direction that things are going. But with the reps and reserve thing, what has helped me is to sort of treat the set like when you're going into the set, treat it as if you're just training to failure, but you'll know when you are actually in that, let's say, 2 to 4 rep range, until
Yeah.
you're reaching failure, because, I've had people where we've had to sort of pull back the intensity in their training. And what I've noticed is that, like, when I say like 2 to 4 RAR, what they were actually doing was more like 5 to 6 RAR. So, actually getting, and this is something that took me a long time to figure out, like how to actually train to 2 to 4 RAR. Like, there is still a ton of intensity in that session. Like 2 to 4 RAR, like that's still a pretty hard set. So, I think just approaching the set as if you were actually training to failure, at least for me, has helped me actually take this set to that true 2 to 4 RAR range, because I'm treating the set as if I'm going to failure. When you are like, let's just say that you are taking a set to failure, when you're about to get there.
Yeah.
So if you just approach it as if, you're taking the set to the bank, you'll know when you're about 2 reps shy of hitting failure. When those reps really start to slow down, you're really struggling to get the weight up, that's sort of when you realize, like, all right, this is probably time for me to call the set here. So when you approach the set with that mindset, opposed to like, all right, I'm getting into the set, I'm going to train 2 to 4 RAR. When you approach it with that mindset, you're much less likely to leave a lot more reps in the tank than you actually can. So I think just understanding that, a 2 RAR set, that's still a hard set, man. And you can absolutely, and this is something that I have struggled with a ton because, like I had mentioned, doing this for so long.
Long.
Yeah, I struggled a ton with just looking forward to my training, just because I'm like, all right, another day of training, with a couple reps in the tank, not how I like to train. And you sort of get in that mindset. It's like, all right, I can't make progress off of this, which is total BS. Like, you can absolutely progress off of leaving a couple reps in the tank. You're still
Oh
within
yeah.
that range. So just sort of getting out of that mindset and getting in your head where it's like, all right, this is kind of pointless. Like, no, it's not pointless. You're still going in, you're still getting your workout in, and you're still training hard, just not as hard as a lot of people would like to train, which, again, it does suck, but for, at least for me in this time, it's sort of a necessity. So it's just sort of finding little things that, and just understanding the importance behind it, and that, I'm still training hard. It's just a matter of doing what I need to right now so that I get my health in check, so I can get back to doing the things that I want to do much quicker.
Okay. I understand that. Okay. Based on that, I have a question that I think so many people deal with, and it's hitting a plateau, hitting that wall, right? Like, you train for two RIR for a long time, and you're like, damn, or you're, you're actually hitting a plateau, like a weight loss plateau. How do you go about getting over that hump?
So if we're talking about like a physical plateau and weight loss, to be honest with you, like, they exist, but it just shows you that something has to change, right? If you have been following, something for, let's say, 2 weeks, and, let's say the scale stopped moving, visuals aren't trending the way that you want them to, something has to change. Either you have to push harder, or perhaps you have to pull back. And that is really going to be dependent on feedback, right? So it's sort of a hard question to answer from a physical perspective, just because, the reason why somebody hit the plateau is going to be different for everybody. So it's just a matter of taking a look at what your feedback is saying and making the necessary adjustments so that you can continue progressing. But if you plateau, there's typically a reason for it. Either you need to push harder, or you need to pull back. It's typically going to be one of those two things.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
based off of your experience as literally you and your journey, are you somebody that favors going towards recovery or going towards, well, you don't really need to recover, you can push harder? Like, how do you kind of debate that? And I know you said feedback, but like, what are you looking for? Like, how do you know if you should be actually recovering? Like, hey, you know what? I've been going hard for a few weeks versus I've been going hard. I'm not really. Maybe I could push a little harder.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'll look at. So if we're just talking about, let's just use generic weight loss, for instance. One of the big things I'll look at is their training performance. If we've been dieting for an extended period of time and their training has started to take a hit, if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, like, to be honest with you, your training should be progressing through that fat loss. You should not be losing
Yeah.
reps. And a lot of that comes down to mindset. Even in a contest prep, a lot of, when people start losing reps, a lot of it comes down to their mindset. But if we are starting to see their training start to take a hit, and also how they feel in that training session. So one of the things I'll ask my athletes is their soreness and how they are recovering from that session. So soreness is a big indication, after that session, whether or not people are actually recovering from the training that they're doing. doing. So if we see the recovery starting to take a hit, we see their performance in the gym starting to take a hit, that might be a sign that perhaps we need to pull back for a little bit. And when I say pull back, I'm not talking like cut out the gym and all of that stuff, but just giving them perhaps maybe they just need a little bit of a diet break. Maybe we need to pull them up to maintenance for a week or two, maybe even longer, and then reassess from there. And sometimes too, if somebody truly does need a break, oftentimes what you'll see is if you're dieting for an extended period of time and you bring their food up to maintenance or even a little bit, even a slight surplus, what you'll see if they really needed that break is oftentimes they'll actually continue to drop weight because you're getting a stress response out of that. So that is a really big indication that somebody needs to pull back. Is just how is their training, and also other look at other biofeedback markers too. How is their sleep? Is their sleep starting to take a hit? How are they feeling mentally? All of those things are really important to look at in regards to the decision that you make to getting over that plateau. Now, if somebody needs to push harder, generally their training is still good, their feedback is still good. If their food is still in a good spot and you have room to continue pushing, then you just need to keep pushing. And feedback, again, will be indicative of that. So if everything looks good and they're still feeling good, they're still able to train hard, and they're just hitting a little bit of a fat loss plateau, we just have to keep digging a little bit harder, and then just kind of continue to monitor feedback from there. And eventually, somebody will. This is kind of going back to the whole fat loss thing. If somebody has to lose a lot of body fat, some people are able to lose all of that in one go. I was able to lose 80 pounds on my own in one shot. Take any breaks or anything like that. Like, my body just kept responding. And I've worked with people like that. Like, I have a guy right now who's lost 60 pounds in one shot, and I haven't changed his diet once. I haven't changed his diet once, and he's lost 60 pounds just off of that. So, some people are fortunate enough to respond like that, but other people, not so much. And you sort of have to break it up into phases. So with some people, you might do like 16 weeks of fat loss, and their food's getting pretty low. Their feedback is starting to take a
Tank a little
hit.
bit.
Yeah, their sleep's getting worse. Their training sucks. They don't look forward to getting in the gym. So then what you have to do at that point is build them back up, build their food back up, spend a little bit of time sort of improving their metabolism by building food back up. And then from there, sort of repeating that process over again. So you sort of have to do it in a more cyclic approach where you're taking periods of time to lose body fat, spend a period of time building their food back up, repeating this process over and over again until they're able to lose that body fat. Now, a lot of people, when I do this with people the first time, they're always pretty hesitant because when you tell somebody that they're losing body fat and they sort of hit a stall where it's like, all right, we don't have room to dig anymore, and we have to sort of go spend time in the other direction. There's a lot of people struggle with that mentally, especially with that idea of building food back up. But when you build food up the right way, a lot of times what will happen, especially if they've been pushing pretty hard, you'll actually see them continue to tighten up and lose weight as you build food back up if you do that the right way. The nice thing about
Hmm.
that is as you build food back up, what's going to happen is that let's just use some arbitrary numbers, for instance. Let's say somebody finishing a diet phase where we've exhausted all of our variables and they finish at 2,000 calories. So their feedback's starting to take a hit, their training sucks, their sleep sucks, and they're not losing body fat anymore. Oh, let's say we spend some time building that food up from 2,000 calories to 8,000 calories.
Oh,
When, or it's not 8,000, sorry, 2,800 calories.
okay.
So let's say we build their food up to 800. Let's just go to 3,000 calories. So we build their food up 1,000 calories. Their body composition after you build food back up, that body composition is going to be much different from when they originally started with you. So
Oh
let's
yeah.
say they started at 3,000 calories. We eventually, through the dieting phase, got down to 2,000 calories, exhausted all of our resources, then built back up to 3,000 calories. They are now starting the next fat loss phase with a brand new body composition, and that's why it's important that food is built up the correct way. That way, when they are starting, that second fat loss phase, they have a new body composition. So let's say they started at 250 pounds, they got down to 220 pounds after that initial 16-week fat loss phase, and then you build back up. Let's just say you gain a couple pounds, so let's say you put on 5 pounds throughout building up that food, so now you're at 230, but that 230 is going to look much better than that 250. And now when you start that second fat loss phase, let's say you pull off, another 20, 30 pounds off of that, each time you start a new fat loss phase, you're starting it from a better body composition, which is going to allow you to continue to pull body fat off. That's why I really like that sort of cyclic approach for those types of people.
I
It's
think a
just
lot of
kind
people
of a
should be
necessity.
taking a more, yeah, people should be taking a more elongated approach. Give me 1 second too. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah,
I wanted to say on that part that I think it's very important for people to have small goals,
yeah,
right? Like obviously having the big end goal of, hey, I want to have abs or I want to be able to do this is important because you have like this is what you're doing it for. But it's also very important to have those small goals because you don't want to get stuck in the I have to do this. Oh my God, I have to do this. Because it will burn you out and it will make it very hard. But if you have like hey, you know what, we're gonna have a 16-week fat loss phase and then we're gonna build back up and then we're gonna go back at it again. I'll say that that's approach I've been doing with one of my clients now is we started off in the fat loss phase and now we're starting to hit the point of like, okay, let's start pushing food a little more and then we'll go back down.
yeah.
And so many people don't realize how actually important that is. You don't have to get down to like 1,000, like 1,800, 1,600 calories. Like you can lose weight and eat a lot of food. One of my favorite things is when I get a new person and I get like their general diet. And then I'm just like, okay, we're eating this and some. And they're just like, I don't want to get fat. I don't want to get fat. And I'm like, I promise you, just run the plan. I promise you.
Yeah, and I think, that initial buy-in is the hardest part, actually getting the client to understand, what is going to happen when we do build food up. But I don't know how you approach nutrition with a lot of your clients, but I would say a majority of my clients are on meal plans. So a lot of times, like they see what they're eating, but they don't really understand like how much they're actually eating. So
Yeah.
there's sort of a niceness to that. I actually just recently I started working with a female who was eating like 1,400 calories. She told me what she was eating. I did the math on it, and she was eating like 1,400 calories. And quite literally, like I made it.
Riley.
No, you're good. And we ended up building her food up from 1,400 calories to I think like 26 or 2,700 calories. So that is quite, that's a lot more
That's a
food that
lot
she
for
was
a
eating.
female.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
too.
yeah, and guess what? Throughout building her food up, because she wanted to lose body fat, but she was sort of at a point, internally, also externally, where she was just kind of like stalled right out. So we had no option but to build food up. And that initial buy-in period was a little bit tough. But after she saw how she was responding to more food, like she lost like 8 pounds building her food up from 1,400 to 2,800 calories. Like that's insane. So she's eating over 1,000 more calories on a daily basis. And throughout that process, she lost 8 pounds and she was like, all right, I'm bought in now, and now we're kind of at the point where it's like, all right, now we can actually start a proper fat loss phase because we actually have food to pull from and we have room to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy because I kind of okay, so that's one of my female clients that I got. That was kind of our initial thing. We started off and like I could get her to buy into the workouts and the cardio, but I couldn't get her to dial into her nutrition.
Hmm.
And we are sitting at like 16, 1,700 for her like size. And I was like, okay, I was like 1,600. I was like, this isn't bad. Like we could be pushing this. And she just couldn't get into it. I was like, okay, like let's come back together and let's figure this out. Like what's really okay. And now we're boosting food, and her body is just changing. Like we're started at 16 and we're at 1,900 right now, and we're probably gonna go to 2,000 if we keep continuing the trend we're going. But like, and now she's like, dude, I'm full. Like I'm full, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, but she's like, it's so nice because now she doesn't have that sweet craving or that sweet tooth or something. Like people got to realize you can actually add in a bunch of different things. My favorite meal to give to people that have a sweet tooth is the yogurt bowls.
Oh, yeah,
Yogurt
those are
bowls
good.
are so good.
Yeah, those are good. I also, this is a personal favorite of mine, but cream of rice. I don't know.
Mm.
Cream of rice is so good.
Do
Cream of
you
rice with a
try like
little.
normal cream of rice, or are you on like the flavored cream of rices from
I've
Elevate
actually
and Pride Foods and all those?
I've never tried them. I'm sure they're good. I've heard good things about them, but I've always just used normal cream of rice with whey protein and some sort of fruit in there. With, if it's a pre-workout, we might throw some honey in there. And I also like throwing in some sort of fat source, whether that's nut butter, coconut oil, something like that. And People love that meal. A lot of people don't, if somebody, because generally, like when I'm making a meal plan, I'll take feedback from somebody in regards to what they like to eat and sort of what they have time for. Some people are able to get a full meal in pre-workout. Some people, they are coming from work, they just need something that they can get in quick to fuel their workout, right? So if somebody like generally doesn't have a preference, I'll throw that cream of rice meal in there. 10 times out of 10, people love that meal. It becomes their favorite meal of the day. So that's a personal favorite of mine, and it does. It's like that's a
Cream of
sweet
rice is
meal.
such a good meal. People don't, yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a, my first ever was a normal cream of rice, but I got the flavor. They like Walmart had like little flavored ones, I think, or
Mhm.
that was cream of wheat. I'd get the maple brown sugar cream of wheat, then I went to cream of rice, and then I just put like protein powder in it. Cream of rice is very, it's like a little dessert. It's like a soft baked muffin cupcake, something in your bowl.
Yeah, no, it is good. Cream of wheat, though, you got to be careful with if you're using it pre-workout, just because it's going to
Is it
digest
slow? No,
much
yeah,
slower. Yeah.
exactly. That's
I
why I didn't know these things when I was starting off. I was just like, people don't. Okay, you don't learn. There's so much to learn, and that's something that I guess you did post about too. Is there's so much information out there, and it's so scary to us, like potential people, like people that are wanting to start and they just don't know where. What would you say is the best thing for somebody who is just looking to start do? Like, not, I know I asked like one thing, but like, what's their steps? Like, what are they doing? Because there's so many different things out there. There's too much information. I don't remember what you said in your post, but it was some like, my favorite thing is over analyzing and like not actually starting. I think that's something of how you said it in your post.
Yeah. So a lot of the big issue, especially, social media is such a great tool, but at the same time, it also hurts a lot of people. And people sort of get, paralysis by analysis.
There it is.
There's so much information out there, and there's so much conflicting information at that.
Mm-hmm.
For every good piece of content that's out there that's actually informative and helpful, there's probably 10 bad ones, right? So it really comes down to figuring out what is true and what is not. And this is where I think hiring a coach to actually help you out with, showing you the right way to do things, that I think that's a good place for, those people who are just struggling with that paralysis by analysis feeling. Is hire a coach. If you're having a hard time with figuring out what information is good, what information is bad, that's sort of an instance where having somebody sort of in your corner to show you the right way to do things, show you the right information, give you the right information, that is going to help those people out a ton. It sort of goes both ways too, like, so with lifestyle people, something that I see, they sort of get that paralysis by analysis where there's just so much information out there and they just get stressed out reading all of it. So that just sort of leads them to just not doing anything at all, just because they're just so stressed out. They don't know what to do, where to start. But on the flip side, I work with competitor as well. And something that I see is they soak up all of that information and they apply all of it. So a lot of times when I'm
Yeah.
starting with like a young competitor, they are like overcomplicating stuff to the point where they are being counterproductive. They're being so analytical about every little detail in their training. They have all these crazy setups, all these exercises, all these crazy training splits. Their nutrition is just out of whack. They have a bunch of weird stuff going on because they saw this guy say this, they saw another guy say this. So they're just kind of overcomplicating everything. So with those types of people, it's a matter of, okay, let's simplify all of this. And a lot of times when we simplify things, obviously with competitors, there are some more nuancy details that are important and that we do want to capitalize on. But at the same time, you don't want to overcomplicate things to the point where you are being counterproductive to the end result that you are working towards. And a lot of times, all of that complication, that unnecessary complication, it stresses you out. And being a stressed out competitor is the last thing that you want, especially if you're in a contest prep. So just
Do I
simplify.
know it?
Yeah. So just simplifying their approach, just telling them, just teaching them that, this isn't as complicated as you make it. Sure, there are complicated aspects of it, but that is stuff for me to handle. But for you, I just need you to simplify all of this. You don't need all of this. You don't need this crazy training split. And a lot of times with young competitors, like, you don't need some fancy training split to, a lot of guys, when they're just starting out and looking and getting and competing, like, they're small. They need to bring up quite literally everything.
Hmm.
You don't need some crazy training split to focus on bringing up this muscle group at a time. Like no, you need
You need
a
everything.
you need to bring up everything. And a lot of what is going to produce that result is how you are training, you know, so improving your intensity and your execution within those movements in the gym. Because a lot of guys think they train hard, but they don't. They
Dude,
don't know how to
training
train hard.
hard is
It's hard.
actually hard. It's not, it's like you have to go into the gym with intention of being better, so to speak. Like you have to go in there and know I'm going to get better in this workout. Because I'll say, when I started, dude, I thought I was in the gym like going hard, and I was not.
Yeah, I actually made a post about this too, the about finishers. A lot of people will add in finishers at the end of their workout to, you know, finish off a muscle group, but the people who are doing that, they're not training hard. You know, if you are able to throw in something at the end of your workout, because a lot of people do that to make up for the lack of intensity in the workout itself.
If you was hitting every set and every workout how you're hitting this finisher, going to failure, pushing
Yeah.
yourself, you would not be having a finisher.
Yeah, and actually, I just had this conversation with one of my athletes yesterday. An issue that he found himself doing was, so I'm pretty sure across the board, he had like two sets per exercise that he was doing. And what he was doing is he was trying to preserve his energy for the end of the workout or like throughout his workout
Hmm.
to the point where he just wasn't training hard whatsoever. And that was, you know, something that I was noticing in his training videos that he just wasn't giving what he needed to give to produce the result that we're looking for. Because, you know, let's say he's doing a flat chest press or a low incline chest press, that his first set, you know, he would leave a couple reps in the tank because he wants to give that effort to his second set. I'm like, no, you need to give 110% to both of these sets, you
Yeah.
know? So a lot of people do some weird stuff like that. And a lot of it too, you know, teaching somebody, and that's like one of the hardest things to do, I think, especially for competitors, is teaching them like how to train hard. That is a really tough thing to teach people because, you know, at the end of the day, like that's a mental thing. You know,
Yeah.
if you're
Work ethic, it's, you got to
yeah,
do it.
yeah, if you're when you're in the depth of a set, like and things start getting hard, you know, fatigue starts to set in, you know, the first thing your body's going to want to do is it's telling you to stop. So it's really just pushing that threshold of getting uncomfortable and being comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling. Because at the end of the day, you know, those last reps are what's going to, you know, that's really what's going to drive the stimulus that we're looking for, that's going to produce, you know, that muscle growth. So one of the things that I've been doing a lot too with guys is I've been steering a lot towards lower rep range work, because I find if somebody's doing, let's say, 10 to 15 reps with, you know, like some sort of pressing movement, you know, when they get towards the end of that set, they're tired, you know, they're super fatigued. You know, higher rep sets are going to obviously produce a lot more fatigue. So they're going to
Hmm.
be, so, you know, if you're 10 reps in, you know, you're going to be much less likely, just because you're tired at that point, you're going to be much less, you're going to have a harder time pushing that movement further to actually reach failure. So I've been working in a lot of work in like the 4 to 6 rep range with a lot of guys, just because we are able to reach those effective end reps much quicker than if we were
Hmm.
to do a higher rep set, you know, because they're, when you're working in the lower rep range, you're not getting cardiovascular fatigue from movement. You know, it doesn't feel like you're doing cardio, you know, working out, doing some resistance training. So that lower rep range is something that I've been using a ton, and I've seen my guys blown up using a lot of that
I
lower rep
also feel
range.
like at that point, I really like that idea because I feel like at that point you kind of get like, I'll say when I first started working out, I'd have like sets of like 3 by 12, and I see
Yeah,
like, oh shit, like I got to hit 12 reps.
yeah,
So maybe I'm gonna hit 80s or 90s on a flat press. Versus if I see I'm hitting 5 to 8 or 4 to 6, I'm like, okay, I'm going up. Like when I was powerlifting, if I had lower weight, I knew I was going heavier. So like
yeah.
mentally, like I'm already gonna push myself harder than I would have pushed myself if I had a lot more reps.
Yeah, and it hurts progression too. You know, if you're thinking, you know, let's say let's just keep using this flat press for instance. Let's say, you know, last week you did 80 pounds for 12 reps. You know, it's like, holy shit, to progress this movement, if I want to progress this movement in reps this week, I have to get 13, 14 reps on this. Like that is a lot of reps, you know.
Yeah.
There's a big mental component to that. So by doing a lower rep range, you know, like mentally having to do 6 reps to progress from last week is going to be a lot easier than trying to progress with 14, 15 reps. So there's a big
Yeah.
mental component to that as well. So it's something that I've been using pretty much across the board with a lot of my competitors and even some lifestyle people as well, just because I've seen a really good response from it from just a progression standpoint.
Now that I think about it, I will say I think I noticed the most of my strength increase in gain when I was a power lifter.
Yeah.
And mainly because as a power lifter, and I know that it's so shitty to say, I was so focused on how strong I was getting. Like diet was not really a thing. It was a
Yeah.
thing. I needed to make weight, but I was already at my weight. So like if I needed to cut, I just needed to sweat or relax before weigh-ins. So
Yeah.
like, but every week, and I know you should be focused on this anyway, but I think as a lifestyle client and as somebody who's in the weight loss, like, or in a competitor client, like you have so many different things to focus on.
Mm.
Right. And I guess that's also why you get a coach. But as a power lifter, all I'm thinking about is, okay, you know what? Last week on bench, I hit 315 for 6. Okay, this week I need to go up. Like I need to move from 315 to 325, and whether that's 4. But when I was losing weight, I was so focused on just losing weight. I was in the gym to get that stimulus and not necessarily like focus on muscle building. But I feel as if I would have continued to muscle build and like focus on like, okay, last week I hit this for this. I need to do this. I would have been able to preserve more muscle than I did now. Because I feel like I lost a decent amount of muscle versus I was. Because now that I'm learning properly how you should be losing weight and what you should be doing, like I could have been just as strong or close to my strength levels than I am now. And I just, man, dude, there's so much out. The paralysis by analysis is what I'm going through right now. There's so much out there, but you just got to go simple. And I think that's what I need to take is a very, very simple approach.
Yeah, I think that's an issue that a lot of coaches are running into too. They're just overcomplicating a lot of things, which is then translating into issues with their athletes.
Yeah,
There is a time and a place for nuancy details, competitors being one of them. But for a lot of people, like they just need simple, and simple most of the time works. That like I said, there's a
it
time
does.
there's a time and a place for those little details, but you also don't want to overload people to the point where, they're doing all of this stuff and it's just hard for them to keep up with. So especially for like lifestyle people, like simple is the way to go. And I know that there's some coaches out there that are sort of going back on things that they used to do because there was a period of time in the industry where people were freaking out and doing all of the, they're worried about all of this little stuff. And I'll be honest, like I sort of caught myself getting onto that trend of like, oh my God, I need to have all my clients tracking their blood glucose. I need to have all my clients doing this, doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not the case. You have to understand when it's time to play certain cards. Like I said, there's a time and a place to do certain things, but if simple is working, there's no need to change it. So just simplifying your approach across the board is gonna produce a good result for a majority of people.
Having not so many different markers, I'll say that when I first started, the only thing I had like 8 questions or
Hmm.
5 questions that I was answering,
Yeah,
and it was working. Like I didn't care about it. I felt good about those things. Everything was going, and I was dropping weight pretty fine. And then I'll say like like now, based off of like everything that I know, and not even like in a coach's way, but like I'm just always like, okay, this, and that. And like sometimes you really do have to go back to these simple things. How are you sleeping?
yeah,
How is your diet? How are you feeling? And I like the fact that now, as bad as this is, we have to both realize that simple is best. Sometimes, like you just gotta relax,
yeah,
focus on the little things, and that is one of the best ways to get out of plateaus, so to speak. For me, I'm in this rut and I just gotta relax, chill, and keep going.
yeah.
Don't have to be in such a rush to get to where you want to be.
Yep. That's why I don't like assigning timelines for things. Like I never tell somebody that we are going to do this for, unless it's like, a contest prep or something like that. But just for like general lifestyle, like I'm never going to tell somebody like, all right, we're going to do a fat loss phase for this amount of weeks, just because that kind of we're setting them up for potential failure, right? In 12 weeks,
Hmm.
if the goal is to lose 12 pounds and they don't lose that 12 pounds in the 12 weeks, like, they're not gonna feel good, not hitting those goals. So it's really just a matter of monitoring feedback. If things are progressing the way that we want them to, why assign a timeline to things if things are still continuing in the direction we want them to move, right? I see this a lot with people in growth phases. They'll be like, all right, I'm going to grow for 20 weeks. Well, if things are still good after the 20 weeks,
You're still growing.
yeah, you're still growing, you're still sleeping well, your training is still good, you're not dealing with any sort of insulin resistance, your blood glucose is good. Why are we going to jump into a mini cut to clean things up if your body composition is still good? Let's just keep pushing, let's keep growing. There's no need to revert and go in the other direction, because then you're just losing out on progress that could have been made. So I'm
People are
not,
in such a rush.
yeah, I think that's why too. I think people, there's nothing wrong with having, timeline goals per se, but you have to be flexible with that, and for a lot of people, having those timelines are going to do more harm than good. So being flexible
Oh
with
yeah.
being able to move things, like, all right, ideally, we do this for 16 weeks, but if things are still going good, we can keep pushing. If things, if we need to revert to something else a little bit sooner, then we can. So just being flexible with moving those timelines around if you are, somebody needs that timeline for whatever reason.
So, as we're getting ready to kind of wrap this episode up, I want to ask you this one question. I like to ask people this is, if you could give anybody out there one piece of advice for anything, what would it be?
If you are struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, and you are not in shape, getting in shape will change your life. A lot of people wonder how that is. I was kind of one of those people. How is changing my body going to change how I think? And it really comes down to a matter of confidence. When you built that confidence, it's going to change how you carry yourself. It's going to change your productivity at work. It's going to improve your relationships. It is going to improve your life tenfold. And also, just how you feel. So it changed my life. I've seen it change clients' life. Therese, it's changed your life. So if you are struggling in any sense and you are not in shape and you are not feeling good, getting in shape should honestly be one of the first steps you do to fix that. It will change your life.
I literally couldn't say anything better than that. That right there is probably one of the best non-sales pitches, but sales pitches to literally just focus on yourself and put yourself first. So many people fail to do that. You have family, you have friends, but at the end of the day, the only person that will truly be at your back is you. Nobody else has that privilege of being you. You live a unique life. So I just want to thank Dylan so much for coming on here. I'm sure we could have him back on here in the future. But other than that, I appreciate everybody that was listening. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to follow us. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And we will see you, or I will see you in the next episode with whoever we have.